Chapter 11. Vince lit the last lamp on 3rd Avenue and paused. Seeing Bartholomew's thugs slink around that dark road gave him a bad feeling. What were those thugs up to? Vince wondered aloud to himself. They were obviously up to something, and something bad at that. Vince was almost done his rounds, having only the hill up to the mansions to do, but his gut told him he should circle back past 4th just to make sure the thugs weren't waiting around to hurt anyone. This is ridiculous, Vince told himself as he walked back towards the street. Why am I going back? They're probably just buying tobacco from an old fisherman or something. As he reached the entrance to the street, he stopped and stared down into the gloom. What are you doing? He thought. You'll just get yourself into trouble. Best to stay away and avoid another black eye or broken rib. As Vince turned to go, a shrill scream rent the air, muffled almost immediately afterwards. My goodness, Vince exclaimed. It sounds like they've got a girl. Tearing down the street and around the bend, Vince burst upon the scene, his eyes widening with shock. There, under the lamp-post, stood the doctor's daughter, her hands pinned behind her back, struggling against the muscular form of one of Bartholomew's thugs. As Vince skidded to a halt, all 3 thugs turned to look at him, sneering viciously. "Guys, let her go," Vince commanded, his voice cracking slightly. One of the thugs not holding the girl walked forward, flexing his huge biceps. "Look who's come to join the party," he chuckled mirthlessly. "Guys, you don't want to do this," Vince said, taking a step back. "Come on now, be reasonable. Let her go and come pick on someone your own size." "If you're talking about yourself, then you better look in a mirror, shrimpy," seethed a familiar, oily voice. Bartholomew emerged slowly from the shadows. Around his face he had bound a black cloth so only his eyes were visible, glinting with murderous hate as he twirled his baton wickedly. "Hold her, boys, while I take care of this rat once and for all." All Vince's life, his father had taught him to turn the other cheek and de-escalate situations. "Son," he had said, "wars are ended when people make peace, not more war." However, in this moment, the words Miss Margaret Cassidy had spoke rang clear in his mind. There are some people that won't ever stop hurting others, so sometimes we just gotta fight back. That time had come. "Not this time," Vince said, readying himself. "I won't let you hurt her." "I'd like to see you try and stop me," Bartholomew spat, charging at Vince, his baton raised high. Bartholomew swung his baton down hard towards Vince's head. Vince dodged to the right, the baton narrowly missing his shoulder. "Ugh!" Bartholomew bellowed, swinging his baton furiously at Vince. Stepping backward, Vince nimbly dodged Bartholomew's clumsy swings, leading him towards the brick wall of the passage. As Bartholomew swung his baton towards Vince's head, Vince caught his arm and spun into him, his elbow connecting with Bartholomew's nose with a sickening crunch. Shifting his weight, Vince kicked Bartholomew hard in the stomach. Bartholomew flew backward into the wall and then crumpled to the ground, his baton rolling from his grasp. Kicking the fallen baton away from Bartholomew, Vince turned to face the thugs. Their muscles bulging, the 2 of them not holding the girl, circled around Vince, one of them facing him, the other cutting off his exit. "You got nowhere to go, street rat," the one in front of him hissed. "Yes," Vince countered, "but at least I'm not as ugly as you." Infuriated, the thug in front of him charged. Vince stood his ground, then at the last second, crouched low, causing the thug to bend over his back. With a grunt, Vince pushed upwards, throwing the thug over his shoulder and onto the cobblestone with a wet smack. As he turned, the other thug flung himself at Vince, fists swinging wildly. Vince raised his elbows, blocking the thug's wild blows and dodging back and forth. Seeing an opening, Vince jabbed out his fist, connecting with the thug's nose, stunning him. Vince swung left, then hooked right, catching the thug across the chin and throwing his head instantly to one side. Out cold, the thug fell on top of the first at Vince's feet. Vince turned on the final thug, who stood holding the young lady in white. Their eyes met for a second, then the thug pushed the young lady towards Vince, fleeing down the gloomy lane and disappearing into the night. Vince caught the girl as she stumbled forward and helped steady her on her feet. Looking back, he saw Bartholomew scramble to his feet. After shooting Vince a venomous glare, he took off down the shadowy passage, vanishing from view. As the adrenaline from the fight began to ebb, a sudden awkwardness overcame Vince and he realized he was still holding the girl in his arms. Remembering the embarrassing scene from earlier that day in front of the barber shop, Vince pulled back and glanced towards the ground. "Sorry about that," he stammered. "Come on, let's get you home." Bella was still shaking as she followed the young man back out into the street where the lamps bathed everything in a golden glow. It had all happened so fast that she could hardly remember what transpired. She recalled being grabbed from behind and screaming, and then hearing the shout of somebody from up the road. Next thing she knew, a flurry of motion had ensued, her rescuer at the center of it, followed by her captor throwing her forward into the arms of whoever had come to her aid. Her heart continued to pump madly, and her eyes darted up and down the street looking for people, but they were alone. Teeth chattering, she felt like she was on the verge of tears as she wrapped her arms around her waist, trying to ward off the chill that seemed to penetrate to her bones. Bartholomew's tailcoat had fallen somewhere in the dark passage when the thugs had grabbed her, and Bartholomew himself was nowhere to be seen. Her head felt foggy and her knees weak. She shivered, squeezing her eyes shut. A warm hand touched her shoulder gently. Here, take this. You look cold." Bella looked up into the eyes of her rescuer. His face looked oddly familiar, and for a second she could not place where she had seen him before, but then it dawned on her. He was the young man from the barber shop. He stood in the lamplight, his cloak outstretched in his hands, looking at her uncertainly. Bella nodded weakly, and the young man placed his tattered cloak delicately around her shoulders. It was warm and soft, and her heart and mind seemed to slow a little. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him. She desperately wanted to say more, to apologize, but she did not know where to begin, and her mind was racing with other questions. How had she lost Bartholomew? Where was he now? Had he been scared off by her attackers? Where was everyone else? How was she to get home? Her last question was answered for her. Looking at the ground shyly, the young man spoke. I don't have money for a carriage, or I'd offer to fetch you one, but I can walk you home. You live in the old English manor atop the hill, right? It's not far from here." "Yes," Bella answered, her quivering voice no more than a whisper. She felt like she was in a daze. As she started forward, her head seemed to clear, and a jolt of panic shot through her stomach. "Wait," she said anxiously, turning to look back at the alleyway. "What about Bartholomew? Where is he?" The young man laid a reassuring hand on her shoulder again. "Trust me," he said with a small smile. "Bartholomew will be fine. I saw him run off. I would not be surprised if he were halfway across town by now." "Are you sure?" Bella asked, turning back to look at him. "Yes, I'm sure," he said kindly. "However, if we don't get you home soon, you'll catch cold." Nodding, she followed him, staying close by his side as they walked down the block and turned up the hill towards her estate. As they walked, Bella glanced frequently over the young man. How did he know where she lived? Why had he come to her aid after she and her friends had been so cruel to him? Oh, how she wanted to say something, to apologize, but she could not seem to find the right way to begin. When they reached the gate to her house, he turned to her and tipped his hat. "I hope you are all right. Have a good evening." He turned to go, but Bella reached out her hand, touching his arm lightly. "Wait, she began, her voice quivering. "You forgot your coat." Pulling his coat from around her shoulders, she handed it to him. Tipping his hat again, he turned to go. "Wait, The young man stopped and looked back. "Thank you," Bella said. "My pleasure," he said, then turned to go again. "Sir," Bella called out again, desperate to talk to him for just a minute more. He turned and looked at her, his eyes meeting hers briefly before darting away. "You're the man from the barber shop, right?" she asked. "It was my fault," he said quietly. "I should not have gotten in your way." "No," Bella said quickly, taking a step forward. "No, it was cruel and spiteful what we did. I am ashamed. I owe you a great debt for standing up to me, even after I failed to do so for you." "That is most kind of you," he said, shifting his weight uncomfortably from foot to foot. Bella extended her hand. "I'm Bella Cartwright." Slowly, the young man extended his hand to shake hers. When he touched her hand, she could feel him tremble slightly. "I'm Vince," he said back, "Vince Cully." Bella did not want the handshake or conversation to end. She did not know who this Vince was, but she longed to. Without thinking, she said the first thing that came to her mind. "The ports are beautiful. They're my favorite place to go." "Yes," he replied, appearing to relax a little. "I love the sea and the breeze. The ports are beautiful, but they can be dangerous, as you learned tonight." He looked down at his hand, which Bella still held, and she blushed, pulling away. "Indeed," she said, "I'm amazed that you managed to overpower all of my assailants by yourself. From what I could tell, there were 3 of them surrounding me, as well as a masked 4th who attacked you. You must be very strong." "Well, my father was a military general for years," Vince explained, "and though he counseled me never to pick a fight, he also taught me how to defend myself if it came to it." "It was very brave," Bella said. Thinking of Vince's heroics suddenly made her feel very self-conscious of the dirt smeared on her gown. Vince paused, looking a little hesitant. "I don't mean to intrude on your business," he said carefully, "but I must admit I am confused. How did you end up in trouble with that particular gang? I saw you with Bartholomew earlier today. Aren't you two, together?" "Well, I suppose we were today, but less by my choice than I prefer," Bella sighed, then shook her head. "It's complicated." "Forgive me," Vince apologized. "I should not have let my curiosity intrude on your personal affairs." "No, it's okay," Bella said quickly. "You see, my friends think very highly of him. I suppose one could say that there are many people, our families included, who expect us to marry each other." Vince nodded. "You don't sound too excited about that." He has proven quite arrogant at the best of times, Bella sighed. He bullies and takes without care. I suppose I fail to see the same virtues in him that others do. I get it, Vince said sincerely. Why would your family expect you to marry someone you don't love anyways? His family has a high title and large estate. My father is a highly skilled physician and has also amassed a noteworthy estate. Those of my household, particularly my caretaker, Mr. Bingham, have always advised that if I was to marry Bartholomew and combine our estates, we could become one of the most powerful families on this side of the country. I see, Vince said, pausing. And what do you want? Bella's heart leapt. Although her father was kind, it seemed like forever since he or anybody else had so genuinely inquired about her hopes and dreams. Well, she began, wealth, class, and prestige are important to many of my close friends and family. However, I wish to marry for love, not political gain. I suppose I quite often feel torn between following my heart and listening to my family's counsel. Bella paused, gazing out over the city, then turned back to Vince. What do you think? She asked. Vince took a step back, looking embarrassed. Oh, I hardly know of such things. I am simply a lamplighter. No, please, Bella assured, taking a step towards him. I would most appreciate hearing your thoughts on the matter. Vince stood for a second, wringing his hands together. Then, taking a deep breath, he replied, Well, my mama used to tell me that home is wherever there are people you love and who love you. A true home is built on love, you see. If one marries for power instead of love, they lose that. What worth is it to gain the whole world if we never find home? His words seemed to pierce Bella's heart, and she stood there, looking at the stranger who had saved her life, wishing she could talk to him for the rest of the evening. She tried to come up with something to say, but her mind was empty. Well, Vince said after a second, I really should be going. Have a nice evening, Miss Bella. Vince began walking away, but hesitated, turning back and reaching into his bag. I believe this is yours, he said, pulling out her rose from earlier and handing it to her. Good evening, he said again, tipping his hat. Bella watched as if in dream as Vince walked back down the road away from her house, pausing to light the lamps along the hill as he went. Although she did not understand how, his words seemed to push away the darkness of the last hour, leaving only the warmth of a newfound hope.